Hello everyone, welcome to Beginner Bokeh. And I want to thank you, of course, for joining my workshop. And this is my second workshop as an Altenew educator. So I am really excited that you guys are all here. And I hope that you enjoy the video version of this. It is a tutorial, so it's not going to be as exciting maybe as the live was, but that's okay. So if you, after you watch this tutorial, if you have any questions, of course, you can email me, and the email that you received is also has my Facebook information in there, so we can communicate via my Facebook group as well. So let's get started. Paper. We're going to do a 5x7 card, and I will show you the example. This is what was in the advertisement pictures. So it's a 5x7 card. It has a layer. We did a layer in here. It's got all the inking. This is the bokeh technique here. We have our embellishment and then our sentiment. So those are the elements of this project. And the way that I teach this technique, I'm going to teach you not how to just do the technique, but I'm going to teach you why it works, what makes it effective, because once you learn the fundamentals of the technique, then you can use this in any other medium. So watercolor, pastel, whatever you're putting on, chalk, whatever you're putting onto your paper projects. And what I did was I did a lot of research on how crafters were taking this photography technique and bringing it into the paper world. And I found so many complicated ways of doing it, and they weren't really teaching it. They were just doing it. And that's fine. But my theory as an educator is if you just sit down and do the technique and not know how you're getting the finished result or why it's working so well and effective, you could get halfway through and suddenly hit a block. Things don't look right, things don't feel right, you get anxiety, you have to stop, you're not comfortable. And those are the blocks that stop people from using their supplies and being a successful artist. So what I did first was I simplified the actual technique, but I'm also going to explain the process of why this is an effective technique in a paper form. So if you want to take notes, of course, take notes. I suggest watching the video all the way through first and then going back and trying it. So that's going to be my approach. Let's get started. My theory is always work smarter, not harder. So that's why I did the smart for you. And then you guys get to do the actual practice of it. So, because I want you to have fun and be successful. So we got to do a little bit of learning first. All right. So the card base, 5x7. I'm going to use the 80-pound Nina Solar White. And I'm going to cut out the base. I'm starting right from scratch with you guys. I haven't pre-made anything so that you can see the whole entire process. So 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock, cutting it down to 10. By 7. And we're going to score it. Now it is going to be a standard book fold card. So on the 10-inch side, we're going to score it at 5 inches. Fold it over. And there is our card base. I'm putting that off to the side so it doesn't get messed up in the meantime. And now the card layer, the layer that we're going to be actually inking and stamping on. This is 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So it's a 1/4 inch smaller on each side. And that's going to give us a nice frame. And I believe in that when I'm doing cards like this that are very artistic, I like to have that white frame around them just because I feel it's an artwork piece. It's framing that piece for us. So that I'm going to actually cut out of a 110-pound Neenah. I like it heavier for the inking process. Granted, the 80-pound is just fine. The benefit of using the 110, if you want your card to feel a little more beefy and have some substance to it, but you don't want to put a foam behind the layer, say you're mailing it because it's already a big card. Upgrade the cardstock that you're doing the artwork on, and that's going to give it just a little more substance. So the layer we're going to work on, 6 3/4 by 4 3/4, and we're going to retain the scraps from this piece to be used again in the project a little later down the line. So don't put those too far away. Okay, so this is what we're going to start working on. Now, let's look at the example card. So what makes this an effective technique? Okay, it's not just circles. The circles are created when the light is breaking down in the background. This is a photography technique. And so in a photograph that has this, the image in the foreground is very clear, very crisp, very defined. The background sort of fades out and models itself, and it gets these little circles, these little light bubbles. So when you go to do this technique, this is where we're going to be adding more definition to it other than circles. We're going to take the entire background and model that. Model meaning we're going to put some background in of the embellishments, but it's going to be not very well defined. It's going to be kind of blurry. So that's where we're going to start. That is where the stencil comes into play. So this is the angelic motifs mask stencil. And on this stencil, this is a very simple stencil, but on this stencil there is a big leaf. There's 2 flowers, so what we're going to be using is the big leaf and the spiky flower. We want the spiky flower because to make this technique really effective, we want all these well-defined lines. So we're going to use those 2 parts of the stencil. And another thing about artwork on a card, and something that might deter you from trying new techniques, is understanding the composition of your piece. If you learn this technique and you go to apply it to a card, but you don't know how to fill the space, you're going to be very restricted. You're going to maybe have some anxiety, and you're not going to want to do the project. So, for example, my example in the live was, if you have a stamp, just a little stamp, and let me just get a little stamp here. If you have just a stamp, and you don't understand how the composition works of your finished project, but you saw a cool technique with the stamp and you want to use it, and you just happen to use a 5x7 card, you're going to see, well, that looks weird. There's no flow, there's no consistency, there's nothing. It's very awkward. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do, and you're going to back away. So, however, if you used that stamp to fill up the space better, that's going to give you better composition and have you more, give you more confidence in the project you're working on. So with that in mind, as far as this project goes, what I did was I utilized like three quarters of the space. So you do have some blank spot up here, but that's fine because it balances out all that's going on down here. That gives your brain and your eyes some time to relax and breathe and bring everything in. The majority of the design in this case is going diagonal. And I'm saying it from the lower, lower right corner up to the upper left. And I have it in that way just because that's the orientation of the card. So we're going to start envisioning our composition and how we're going to fill up this space. And we're going to fill it up from the lower right to the upper left. The first trick for this technique is not the circles, okay? The first trick is to create the background that the circles are going to be reflecting off of. And to do that, we got our inks out here. You probably wondered why we had such light inks. This is a technique to use light inks for. So we've got Pastel Sunrise, Blush, and Frosty Pink. We have Velvet, but we're not going to use Velvet right now. We're going to start, because in a photograph, it's not just the lights that are playing off, those light circles that are playing off everything and each other. It's the background of like the flower or the tree, whatever it is you're taking a picture of. That background is there, but it's also kind of blurred out with that light effect. And putting that into your paper project, that's what makes this very effective. So we're going to start with this big leaf. And with your brush, I got my pink, red, and orange brush out here. Just because I might use they're very easily interchangeable with the colors. So we're going to create our first layer of background. And what that means is we're going to take the Pastel Sunrise, which is the darker of our three pinks. And I'm going to start, I got my stencil kind of hanging off the cardstock here. I'm going to start by inking the top area and coming down very, very lightly. The thing with ink blending, of course, is you can always add, but you cannot take away. So we're going to start a little dark, and then bring it down. My paper moved. And now I didn't tape this down or put it on anything to make it stay, because it really doesn't matter if it shifts on you. The whole point of this technique is that's what it is. It's a shifting of light and images anyways, so don't worry if this slips around on you. Okay, so you see here where we have that dark, and then it just fades to light. We're going to do that again, and also flip your stencil over sometimes, because you can get a completely different look. But with the same color, we're going to do the same technique. We're going to ink darker, so a little heavier hand at the tips of those leaves, and just lightly fade it down. And let's flip it over again. Let's do one up here. Don't forget that little leaf. And let's put one more up here. This one, again, it's going to hang off. That's going to lead our eye further into this this background. So now we have that there. Now, we're going to use that same stencil again, but we're going to move over to the blush. Just switching up my brushes here. And now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go up a little higher this time. We're going to turn our stencil. We're going to try and find a spot to fill in that white space above here. And we're going to do the same technique with the blush. This time we're not going to fade down as far. We're really going to concentrate on just the tips of the leaves. So that's kind of like a ghost of the leaf. And let's flip over and let's do one here. And you can see that the stencil is overlapping that layer below it, and that's perfectly fine. That's the whole point of this technique. And again, I'm just putting the color at the tips of the leaf, and that's it. Kind of makes it look like it's in a fog. Okay, so we got that. Now for our third color, the frosty pink, we're going to switch over to this spiky flower. Okay. Actually, that's pink. I had the red brush. Hold on. Let's get the pink brush. All right, now this is a very light color, and for our third layer of inking, you're going to be using this pretty heavy-handed. We're going to do just like we did with the first layer. We're going to concentrate on inking and feathering down. And we're going to start lower on the card. So I am pressing pretty good and hard into the petals on this stencil and feathering it down. I'm putting more ink. I'm pressing more to get ink at the tip of my brush. And now we're going to put one here. And again, I turned my stencil because that's going to give us some interest. Like I said, this is a very light color, so don't feel bad for going back and picking up more ink, because the point of this third layer is to get some darkness in there. See that? So now we're creating this ghostly, I call it ghostly, background. Let's put one down here. Now there's different ways to use different colors when you're doing this first layer. And I'll explain that in the samples that I show you after this, after the tutorial here. Let's flip the stencil and put one here. Okay, so that gives us a lot of definition. So this is the first trick. This is where a lot of techniques out there in the internet, they're not showing you what actually makes this an effective technique. This is what happens in the photography version of it. So why not put that into your paper version? This will make it a lot more effective when you do your own projects, other than just putting those little circles around. Okay, so that is actually our first layer. That's our secret weapon in the project here. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to stamp in this layer here, this mid-ground, okay? And that we're going to use the velvet for. Now for this, I'm not going to use a Stampin' Platform. I'm going to use a stamp block. And this is from the Morning Flowers Layering Stamp Set. For that mid layer, I'm only going to use the highlight layer of the leaf. Now, you could put all layers of the leaves on there, but that would be, hey, you've practiced this and you want to step up your game, by all means, add other layers. You can keep adding other layers. The point is, you want to get it a bit darker. So maybe use 2 different colors that are similar and make double rows of leaves. But this is just beginner bokeh, so I'm just keeping it as simple as possible. And from this, again, you can elaborate on. So using the highlight layer for the stamp, just on a block and just with the velvet ink. And again, I'm going to start here and move up. If you're doing a technique like this, a fool the eye technique or a painting technique or something very, very elaborate, I suggest starting where you start all the time. Always keep going in that direction. Because if you start here and come down, you may end up getting something too dark up here, and then they're not going to fade, or they're not going to have that movement you're looking for. So I would suggest that. So I'm always going to start in the same spot and keep going in the same direction. And at first, I like to do a stamp off. I'm going to stamp off on the cardstock and off of the cardstock, because that will create an illusion of the visual going that way. And that, when you create these little illusions on your projects, it brings the recipient into the artwork, and it makes it a more of an experience to receive. And I'm going to stay in the same direction and just keep putting my leaves. And the cool thing about using the block is, of course, you can turn it around a lot. And I'm going to do that. You're going to see me spin my block around a couple times. I think we get so into using our Stampin' Platforms, we forget the benefit of a Stampin' Block. So don't forget, there's a lot of potential in a Stampin' Block. You can, like, you know, rotate, flip. Okay, so now we have that going. And we'll put one more right there. Go. And we are going to be using this stamp later, so, oh, that's alcohol. Don't want to use alcohol. So I'm going to clean them off real quick. We are going to use that. And this set, this Morning Flowers set, if you're new to stamping or new to layering stamps, I highly recommend this set. It's very easy to play with. I think it's, as far as the layering sets that I've used, it seems to be the most forgiving, and it has a lot of option. It has good surface of the stamps, so you can go back in and play with adding colored pencils or markers or anything else to your stamping. It's kind of like a coloring book stamp. So I really, really suggested this one for this project. It looks very fancy when it's done, but it's very, very simple stamp set to use. Okay, so now we have our second layer. Now, there is another thing you can do, and I'm going to show you in an example afterwards. The card that we made in the live, there was another layer of stenciling that went in before we put these leaves down, and that was to create more of a filled look. So keep in mind that I'll show you that example when we're done with this one. So from here, now we get to do the fun part. Now we get to do the actual circle bokeh technique. And it's all going to converge together for that really effective look. So let me move my stamps. And we don't need this yet. I'm going to move this out of the way temporarily. And one of those scraps from making the card layer. Okay. I don't know why I flipped it. Same thing. It's the same. You're going to take your scrap and you're going to take your circles. Now, the circle set that I suggested to use has bigger circles in it. Okay. And the bigger circles are good because, again, this is a beginner tutorial. Once you learn how to work this technique with the big circles, then you can move to adding smaller circles, and I'll show you that as well when in just a moment. But this is what you're going to do. On your die cutting machine, platform, whatever machine you have, you might want to tape those down if you don't have a magnetic platform. I use the Anna Griffin Empress, which has a magnetic cutting plate, and it's electronic, which is great. So you're just going to put your dies down on the cardstock, and it doesn't matter really what pattern you put them in as long as you fit them all in there. So I'm going to run this through my machine. Okay, and that is what we're left with. Then you've got these fun little circles you can play with for another project. Okay. This is where the magic happens. Are you ready for this? Here is our layer. You're going to use all three of the inks again, the Pastel Sunrise, the Blush, and the Frosty Pink. And we're going to use them in the same order that we did the stencils. Okay, so that's keeping our consistency throughout this. That's the other trick to making this effective. If the effect in a photograph is created from the element that's being photographed. So it's got the same colors in it. They could just be brighter or shiny or whatever, but those colors have migrated into that circle effect. So we're using the same colors and the same succession and layering. So starting with the pastel sunrise, you're going to take your circles and you're just going to decide where you want to put them, maybe like this. Now, as we did with the first stenciling leaf, we are going to ink our brush, apply ink at the top of each of these circles, and fade it down. And don't forget these circles that are covering the image. Those as well are going to be inked at the top and faded down. Now again, these are very, very big circles. And if you can learn and practice how to work this technique in the big circles, then I'm going to show you what happens when you add little circles to it. It will expand the whole technique. Okay, so now you can see where that technique is starting to come about. So next we're going to use blush. And this time I'm going to flip my stencil over and put it this way. Ink up my brush and same thing, start dark and fade down. I'm not pressing hard dark, I'm just letting more of the ink rest at the top of the circle and feathering it down. Just like we did with our leaves. Oops, I missed one. This was supposed to be here. Again, it's okay if it overlaps, it's supposed to. All right, you can see that. And we have, I'm going to cover these so I don't get confused. We have our last one, Frosty Pink. Now the Frosty Pink, we're going to actually add this one pretty dark because it's a very light pink. So find some fun spots to put this one. Again, you're going to put the color at the top, but you're going to leave it there. We're not going to feather it down this time. And I'm pressing actually pretty hard to get that color line in there. And where it overlaps another color, get it dark there as well. Okay. And let's put this one here. See, I'm not blending at all, really. I'm just scrubbing that ink right into it. See that? And then we'll put one up here. So another fun thing is this is also a great technique to clean your brushes. So if you've done a huge inking project and you got lots of messy brushes, get out a bunch of scrap cardstock, get out your Bokeh stencils, bust out a whole bunch of backgrounds, and then your brushes will be clean. And there we go. There is how we create a very easy and effective Bokeh background. Now, here is where, once you've practiced, once you've gotten comfortable, you can then get into smaller circle dies or even a hole punch. This is just the standard 1/4 inch hole punch. And you can create a second stencil. So this is your first one. Then you have a second one. So then you go through and you can keep layering these circles. And I'll show you what that looks like in another example afterwards. Again, this is just beginner Bokeh, so we're just keeping it simple. All right, the next and final step is to do our stamping for the embellishments and the sentiment. So let's move this out of the way. Yeah, oh, of course I hit the light again. Okay. I say again because if you attended the live, you'll know that's what I kept doing. It's a touch light, so I touch it. Now, all right, so now we're going to do the leaves for the embellishment, and that is these, of course, right here. Now, in this layering set, it has 3 layers for the stamp, for the leaves. But we only have 2 greens in this project, so we're only going to be using 2 of the layers, which is perfectly fine. It's a light, muted colored project. It's perfectly fine to use only the 2 layers. We don't need that definition layer. But we are going to incorporate double stamping, and that's going to give us darker tones of the same colors rather than introducing other dark greens. The more you can use all the colors in your project only, the more, what's the word? The more together everything blends, the easier it is on the eyes. You're not introducing colors that aren't naturally already happening in that project. So everything in your artwork is going to coordinate. So we're going to use these light greens, but we're going to stamp them a couple times so that they're darker versions of themselves. It's not a completely different color altogether. So I'm going to use my stamping platform for these, and I have one more sheet of leftover cardstock from making that layer, so I'm going to use that. And because we're only using 2 layers, we're using the solid background layer of the leaf and the middle highlight layer. So what we're going to do is going to be kind of like a backwards technique. We're going to start the solid layer with the lightest green, and the highlight layer is going to be the darker of the 2 greens. So we're going to start with limeade, and we're going to make 2 of these. So here goes our first one. Now what I did right there, since I like using the mini cubes, and it's a very light color, I smeared it all over first to make sure at least I got some ink everywhere. Then I can go back with my ink pad itself and dab on there. It's just what I like to do if I'm doing a solid surface stamp in a very light color. So see, super light. So we're going to stamp it twice. This is another key trick to make your projects look very professional, very artistic. Just stick with the same colors, only manipulate those colors to get them to do what you want, to be darker or lighter. Okay? And give it a wipe off just so we can position him again. Oops. Okay. I'm going to see if I can fit everything I need to on this paper to die cut it. Okay. There we go. Okay. And now we're going to come in with the highlight color, which is going to be frayed leaf. So in this case, the highlight is really the shadow color. There's no rules. You just do what works for your project. Okay. That red color, that's just the stamp that's been stained after being used so much. It's not going to transfer back onto your project. That's the dye from the inks has gone into all the little cells in the photopolymer substance. And again, we're going to stamp it twice. See, so we got a nice dark version of that color and we didn't change anything about the project. Okay. Give it a little stamp CPR there. I really do like these two colors together for leaves. Okay, now we are going to do the flowers, and we're going to do the same concept with the flowers. We're going to start with the lighter colors coming towards the darker. So when we had our colors like this, the pastel sunrise, the blush, and the frosty pink, we're going to start backwards now. You don't have to. I just like to. I feel that that retains the originality of the colors. So for this one, the flower has lots of layers. It has a solid layer, it has the mid-level layer, and then it has its inside layers, the highlight layers, and then it goes further into other layers. So we are only going to stick with the three main layers of this, which is the base. That is going to go here. And there's also in this set a single flower. You can see down here, 1, 2, 3 single flower layers. So we're going to do that one as well. We're going to color them all the same just to make it simple. There we go. Okay. So this time let's start with the frosty pink. And again, I'm going to rub it down. And then give it some good dabbing. See how light that is? And if you're tempted to do it a third time, by all means, go ahead. Okay, now the second layer has some details, so that's going to be in our blush. I'm going to try and line this up as good as I can without sticking my head up in the camera space. I think that's pretty good there. And then for this little guy, but don't forget that the stamp set comes with the layering guide, and that's what I actually need for the little guy, because sometimes he can confuse me. So let's see. I'm looking at his center. Okay. And again, I'll try to do, oh, I think I got him right up in there. All right, let's go for it. I'm probably at the point where these are some of my favorite colors, and so probably at the point where they need some re-inking. You're coming out a little dry in spots. That's okay. They've had a good run. I'm just going to put some water on my chamois here and wipe these down. I do clean my stamps off after every time I stamp and try to keep them in a central location so they don't get lost. I work in a very small crafting space, and if I don't do this, I will have a rough go of life. So, okay. But hey, it's a good habit to get into, right? Okay, third layer. Third layer is the detail layer, and we're going to use the Pastel Sunrise for this. See, it's a believe it or not, like I said, it's a pretty easy stamp set to layer. I really do like that. Okay. That goes there. Again, it doesn't matter what order you put your colors in for the flowers. For the leaves it did, but for me, I just keep it all the same. Light to dark in one project or dark to light in another project. Okay, now there's also, for this set, there's like 3 layers for the flower insides. but I usually forget about the flower insides, and I will generally come back with a yellow marker and stick a dot in there and call it done. But what I did was I took the largest piece for the flower insides, and although it's not going to match all the flowers, I'm going to do a second generation stamping, and I'm just going to make it work. So I'm going to stamp once onto my scratch paper and then once into the flower. And again, now because this is a beginner tutorial technique here, again, you can go ahead and use all the all the layers you want for your centers. Of course, what I like to do actually, and a lot of times because I've forgotten to put the centers in there, it's actually led me to be more creative. I can use marker, I can use stickles, I can put jewels. So it actually creates a lot more decorative opportunity. Now there's one more stamp. There's a little stem that we have to put in right here. And that's going to be the same as we did these leaves. We're going to do the back layer, the background layer as the limeade, and the highlight layer as the frayed leaf. Okay. And I'm going to just line him up there. Two stampings of that. Okay. All right, now we can die cut these out. Clean up some room there. Of course, this is the matching dies that come with it if you buy the set. Okay, this will be the first run, and then we'll run it again to get that second leaf out. I love those light colors. They're so dainty and fresh and springy, I guess. Okay, one more leaf. If you hear any strange random noises, That would be my cat Hobart, who is sleeping under my table. And sometimes he makes Baby Yoda noises, and I'm not sure why. Okay. There we go. Oh boy. There he goes, making his noises. Now there are a couple little spots in the leaves to poke out, to weed, whatever you want to call it. Okay. All right, now we can assemble our card. So we have our card base. Make sure you have the opening the way it needs to open. We're going to put that right down in the middle. I use liquid glue. Personally, I need the wiggle room that liquid glue allows. It dries great and lasts forever, but it gives you just enough time to scooch this around when you're doing borders, in case you don't get it in the right spot at first. Okay. And then I'm going to use up some of my leftover foam dots. I thought I had my tweezers close at hand. There they are. And we're going to put the foam dots on the backs. I have no idea where the foam dots came from. I've had them forever, literally. And we're going to put foam dots on our flowers. You don't have to put foam dots, of course. I like foam dots, and since we didn't put a foam backing to raise up that decorative layer, I feel like we can take some foam liberties and pop up our flowers. Okay. So starting with the leaves, let's get their backings off of those. Oop, took the whole thing off. A little heavy-handed. Now, we're going to take one flower, or one leaf. We're going to have it going up this way. We're going to take the other one, and we're going to have it down here going this way. So that fills up our space. Now we're going to come in with our flower cluster. Put that right on there. And then we have the one single flower. I like to tuck that one in. Right there. And now we have this arrangement, and now we're going to make a sentiment, which is going to be very easy and quick. We're going to go over to some of our scrap right here. And I'm going to try a different color, but maybe the blush. Yeah, let's do blush. All I'm going to do is take a brush and my blush. And I'm going to find a good corner that I don't, so there's a good corner that I have space in. And I'm going to just ink that corner. This is the best way to get color-coordinated cardstock to your project. So I made a big enough area so that I can play around with my sentiments. The sentiments that I picked out to use on this card was sending lots of hugs. So that's 2 separate stamps. And I'm just going to use my block for this. And the block is great because it does have lines. So you can line it up, you can line your sentiment up on the block. Of course, I'm doing it backwards. Or you can line it up on your project. And sometimes that's fun when you have 2 different sentiments, like this hugs. It's in a different font as well. So it kind of looks fun if I like put it on a slant. And this is a very direct font. So I put it over to the corner because now all I have to do is cut out 2 edges and not 4. So I've sized them up there and I can pick them up on my block. And I'm going to use the velvet ink for this. There we go. And if you have a paper trimmer, of course, you can trim these out with your paper trimmer. If you want to be brave and just go for it, a lot of people just go for it. That's fine. And remember, cutting, you can cut off, but you can't put it back. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these sentiments like this. And what I like to do on a hand cut sentiment is take that darker ink and just run it along the edge to give it a good frame. It also fills in those raw fibers from cutting. So it soaks in right there. And on that, we can add some foam squares as well. And you want to put one in the middle so that your sentiment doesn't sag, especially if it goes through the mail, it will get smushed and sag in the middle. Okay. All right, and then you just decide where you want to put it. I like tucking the sentiment on this card. I like tucking it right in by the flowers. And there we are. And there is your beginner bokeh technique card. Now, let me show you the other examples and ways that you can play around with this technique. All right, so here's the one we just did right now. And here's the one from the live. Now this one, if you remember a little earlier in the tutorial when we were doing the middle layer, I said that you could come in with the greens and do the same technique of stenciling those background leaves with the green. And that's what we did on this one. You can see it there, you can see it over here, and it does just kind of fill in more. So if your sentiment's not going to take, if your embellishment or your sentiment is not going to take up a lot of space on your card, you can do that same stenciling leaf technique with the greens and put them down at the bottom. So that's what we did here. Now on this one, you see those little circles I added? And that's what I was saying is once you get good and comfortable with the big circles, then you can get another, you can use another set or even a hole punch that you can make little holes with. And you can come in and add those. And once you add those little layers, that's when you get the full, really, really cool professional effect. So on this card, this is a 6x6 card, and not only does it have the big and the little circles, but it used the Persian motif as our middle layer instead of the leaves. So it's the same colors, but an outline stamp, which is just as effective. And then what I did, I came in and I added pearls. And then I also added vellum circles. I had a scrap of this decorative vellum, and I cut circles out of that, and I stuck those down strategically to give another layer of the effect. And on this one, this is the one from the advertisement for the class. This one I used colored pencils. I came back in and used the woodless colored pencils to enhance these and make them just a bit more colored. So you've got lots of different options, and once, like I said, once you get comfortable using the big circles, start playing around with other shapes until you get something really, really, really cool. And this sentiment here, this is from the Circled Sentiments stamp and die set, which is my absolute favorite. This sentiment is from the Happy Birthday Mini Delight. And then the one from the class, the Live. Same sentiment that we did today, just cut out of the die blended cardstock. So there you go. That is your beginner bokeh technique. I can't wait to see how you guys work your projects and share them. And let me know if you have any questions, and if you had any ideas, or just let me know what you thought of this. I would love feedback always, and have fun, and Happy New Year.